Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's Thursday, the 7th of August 2025, and the time is 2:20 p.m. It's another beautiful day out there, but it sort of goes overcast and then brightens up and then goes overcast. You know, one of those days when the weather gods can't quite make up their mind. And I'm still quite unwell and I feel like hell, but anyway, my lovely Rati's just been and gone, cleaned the house, so I thought I'll read you a story and then I'll probably crawl back into bed for the rest of the afternoon, see how I feel after I read the story. And I've got my birdie boys free ranging. Well, Kermie's chosen to free range. Bo's just sitting there like a little stool pigeon, or in his case, stool cockatiel, and Kermie's kind of winding him up a bit. But that's all right. It's a living. It's a living. They're very happy boys. Rati tells me the little cockatiel, she was talking to him and he was trying to talk back, but in bird language, going tweet, 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 tweet. It's the sweetest thing. He really loves her. He doesn't talk to me. Oh, well, he does. He just talks more in energy and body language. But I'd said to Rati, I said, I'm very happy I brought those birdie boys into my life. I'll be happier when they're tame and I can hold them on my hand and walk around the garden with them like I used to with Charlie. But for now, we're quite happy with each other. They're doing their thing and I'm doing mine, and living quite amicably and happily together. So there is that. So we're up to chapter 12, Stepping Up. And the guilty man stood free outside when he took the stand to pay his debt. Steve Earle, Justice in Ontario. Curiosity propelled Campbell to attend the preliminary hearing in Port Hope in February 1979 for the murder charges against his 8 clubmates. The site of the hearing, the town's quaint red brick town hall, seemed a bit incongruous for what was being packaged as a cold-blooded gangland hit. It was built back in the 1850s when some serious people thought Port Hope could one day be the capital of Canada. By the time of the trial's preliminary, the town's glory days were long gone. Rather than being a centre of power, Port Hope was fast establishing itself as a favourite destination for hardcore antique collectors and visitors happy to eyeball its impressive architecture and soak in what one newspaper described as its pleasingly old-fashioned and somewhat sleepy vision of civic orderliness, right down to the white picket fences, lovingly arranged flower gardens, and cats napping on porches. I received some good news from the Brisbane City Council this morning. I'm going to get a green waste bin so I can put all my prunings in the bin and send it out for recycling. I'm very happy about that. Could have done with it 10 years ago, but I'm still grateful and happy. It'll come in good use. So I've been worrying what I'm going to do with my dragon fruit because it needs cutting down, where I was going to put it all, and this came as an answer to my prayers today. Well, the bin's not arriving till the week beginning Monday the 25th of August, but it's on its way. And my bank returned the money that was stolen from my account, so that was another little relief that I got that money back. And I shall have to be very, very careful, because I've got to juggle finances like a mad woman for the next few weeks, because I've got a hairdresser appointment on Tuesday, and then my rego goes out, and I've got $300 in bills to Optus going out. So it's as fast as I can, which is situation normal for me, but things are starting to look up. It would have been far worse for me if that money hadn't been returned. So another thing to be happy and grateful for. You've got to acknowledge when things turn out the right way and get resolved in my favour. Dear Goddess. But I could have done without those 4 days of extreme stress when I was already very sick, mind you. So that was a bit of a kick me when I'm down moment. But anyway, it's over now. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. Right, beautiful people of planet Earth. Campbell attended in the hope he could somehow insert himself into the legal proceedings and get his clubmates off the charges. It baffled him how 8 Satan's Choice members could be charged for killing Bill Matiak, while he, the real and only gunman, wasn't one of them, even though it seemed every cop in the area knew who he was and that he was plenty violent. He had heard rumblings that so-called eyewitnesses were getting ready to testify with reasons of their own for cooperating with the Crown. Perhaps after he took a look at things for himself, it might all make more sense. Pillman came with him. Peter Rabbit was close to a dead ringer for Campbell, and sometimes Campbell himself had to squint when looking at a photo to see which one of them was in it. Peter Rabbit was slightly taller and slightly younger looking, but not much. He wasn't eager to make the trip, but he also knew it would be considerably less aggravating to go than to refuse Campbell's invitation. Campbell was curious to see if any of the so-called witnesses would recognise him. He and Peter Rabbit, I still laugh at that name. He and Peter Rabbit attended on the day the coroner took the stand, and other Crown witnesses sat in a room near the courtroom, awaiting their call to testify. No one seemed to pay them any attention as they walked back and forth past the open door of the witness room. 3 or 4 times I walked by with Rabbit. I didn't stare in, just walked by. One might have expected a startled reaction from at least one of them. It wouldn't have been shocking if the police were called and told that the real killer and his double was parading past the witness room. What happened instead when they walked past this witness room was nothing. We've lost Kermie. Where's our Kermie boy? Where are you, Kermie? Ah, there you are. Okay. It was as if the people gathered inside had never seen either of them before. None of them said, "I believe it was him." It just befuddles me. I thought, how the fuck could that happen? They knew me. I hung around Port Hope. The only real reaction from anybody that day came from Sanguini, who clearly wasn't comfortable with Campbell's fact-finding stunt. He didn't explain why he was upset with Campbell in the courthouse, and Campbell didn't ask. Whatever his objections, a complaint from Sanguini wasn't to be lightly dismissed. So Campbell reined in his little experiment and went home, still wondering how the case could proceed without the real shooter in custody. It seemed the worst thing the accused had going for them was the fact that they were all members of Satan's Choice, and who, besides their families, would cry if 8 bikers were packed off to prison on a flimsy case? Who would feel less safe? We were the scourge of the country, reflects Campbell. Campbell decided there was really only one thing left to do. So one day he announced to Charmaine that he was going to step up and confess to the shooting of Bill Matiak. To that point, he hadn't told her a thing about what had happened that evening in Port Hope. He believed in handling his business by himself, but this couldn't be kept quiet any longer. Charmaine now had a life-changing decision to make. It was likely that he would be heading for a serious stretch in prison, and it didn't seem fair to make her wait for his return. Charmaine was young and deserved a chance to start a new life. I told her it wasn't going to happen. I said, "We'll part. Get on with your life." Charmaine refused the way out he offered her. "No," she said, "I'm with you." The Crown appeared amenable to a deal. Their case was far from airtight, since they were trying to make first-degree murder stick without much evidence. They also didn't have a clear motive and were just guessing about the identity of the shooter. A month before the trial was to begin, the Crown offered a deal that meant everyone charged could walk free, and Campbell would get a life term for first-degree murder, with no parole eligibility for 25 years. Campbell verbally agreed, but a few days later, without explanation, that deal was withdrawn and a new offer tabled. Campbell could plead guilty to second-degree murder, an acknowledgement that the shooting was reactive and not premeditated. That sounded accurate enough to Campbell. He would get a life term with parole eligibility after 10 years. The rub was that everyone else, rather than walk free, would get 4 years as accessories to the crime. The bikers were solid that they had to vote unanimously in favour of any deal, or it would be rejected. The Crown also wanted a blanket deal. It had to be everyone or no one. T.H. Hoffman balked at the offer. He hadn't even been in Port Hope at the time, and a police wiretap at the Kitchener clubhouse would later back his alibi. The idea of serving prison time understandably didn't sit well with him, and the others respected that. It's not fair to do time for a crime you haven't committed. Jesus. The deal was rejected. Campbell waited for a new offer, but the Crown's mood had cooled. The optics of wheeling and dealing with the province's toughest outlaw biker club on a high-profile murder case weren't good. Far safer for the Crown to proceed to trial and take their chances with a jury. Port Hope is a small town, and the Queen's shooting was big news. All the local publicity could easily prejudice a jury, so the trial shifted down the highway 3 hours west to London. That would be London, Ontario. That meant the defence lawyers from Eastern Ontario would be picked up in a chartered plane that hopped to London at the start of each week and flown back to Eastern Ontario at the end of the week. It was highly unusual for the public to pay for lawyers' air travel, but it was considered acceptable under the circumstances. The trial was now set for the newly built London courthouse, a mound of bricks and glass in the city's core that could pass for an insurance company's or bank's headquarters. Just a couple of blocks away, overlooking the Thames River, sits the old Middlesex Country Courthouse, a local landmark with personality to spare. Resembling a Gothic castle or medieval movie set, it had been the scene of a notorious miscarriage of justice a century earlier. The Donnellys were a 19th century version of an outlaw biker club known for fast horses, ready fists, and rough, unflinching brotherhood. After a gang of supposedly respectable men clubbed and pitchforked them to death in 1880, truth took a holiday. Despite 2 trials at the Middlesex County Courthouse, a combination of lying witnesses, political meddling, police bumbling, and widespread prejudice meant no one was convicted from the mob that murdered 5 members of the Donnelly clan. Campbell could only hope that the local delivery of justice had improved with the passage of time. As the trial began, heavily armed members of the OPP's tactical unit could be seen on rooftops and on the streets and in the hallways of the courthouse. It was as though the paramilitary officers were standing guard against a modern-day horde of Cossack warriors on Harleys. In one headline, the London Free Press described the courthouse area as like an armed camp. Inside, the Fort Hope 8 were all neatly dressed in conservative suits or sports jackets. Their hair was groomed and beards trimmed or shaved off altogether. Despite their gussied up appearance, none of them denied they belonged to the Satan's Choice. Crown Attorney C.J. Meinhardt showed the jury mugshots of their hairy pre-trial bikerish selves, lest anyone be mistaken about how they looked the night Bill Matiak died. Meinhardt told the jury he was about to prove that Matiak was the victim of a premeditated gangland-style execution. He was slain to make an example of him, and the guilt for his death was shared by at least 8 members of the Satan's Choice. Bikers who guarded the doors to make sure Matejek couldn't escape were just as guilty as the one who actually pulled the trigger, or so went the Crown's theory. The jury also heard that Matejek had a .32 caliber semi-automatic pistol in his left breast pocket, loaded with a clip of 8 bullets. The breech of the gun was empty, meaning Matejek hadn't cocked it for firing when he was hit with 3 close-range bullets. That was a mystery for the bikers, since Matejek had talked about having 9 friends. The assumption had been that he was talking about 9 bullets in his pistol. No one could name 9 Golden Hawks. If there had been a bullet in the chamber, where was it now? Campbell wondered if it was ejected by a police officer to make Matejek appear more like a victim. The jury heard that one shot grazed Matejek's upper left arm and shoulder, then hit his jaw and deflected down and out the right side of his neck. Ouch. The second blast went in the back of his head, double ouch, and out his right ear, triple ouch. The third went through his right ear and was stopped in his brain. That was the bullet that ended the life of Bill Matejek. All shots were fired from Matejek's left side, and a pathologist said it was impossible to tell how many gunmen were involved. He also noted that Matejek's blood alcohol level was double the legal limit to drive. Under questioning from Como's lawyer, Howard Kerbel, 23-year-old labourer David Gillespie, admitted that his statement to police the day after the shooting was made with some haste and some fright after I'd had a few drinks. Then he added a potentially damning statement. Gillespie told the court he'd overheard Como ask Sauvé and Blaker, "Are we going to do it to this fat fucker now, or what?" If the jury accepted this, then the choice members were on the hook for first-degree murder, since the comments suggested planning and deliberation before the killing. But despite claiming to have overheard Como say this to Sauvé and Blaker, Gillespie also said he couldn't be sure if he had seen Sauvé close to Matejek's table on the night of the shooting. He also wasn't positive about whether Como was at the table either. "Look at him," Kerbel ordered. "Look at Mr. Como. How is he the man you saw at Mr. Matejek's table? Now. Is he the man you saw at Mr. Matejek's table before he was shot?" "He looks like the man." Upon further examination, the court heard that one of the witnesses had once said that another man named Ray Snyder could be the gunman, but he was never further identified or charged. The Crown's case appeared even shakier when a police identification officer admitted he didn't have any prior experience showing photographs to prospective witnesses. He also conceded that perhaps he should have shown individual witnesses the photos separately rather than as a group, although he added that he couldn't recall them talking while they viewed the pictures. When Queen's Hotel waitress Gail Thompson took the stand, she testified she was certain that Comeau was the killer. So there is no doubt in your mind that you were able to identify Mr. Comeau by his hair and by his beard? Kerbal asked. Correct. No doubt? Not even the slightest doubt? No. And there is no doubt in your mind, not the slightest doubt, that Mr. Comeau is the man you saw get up from Mr. Blaker's table, walk towards Mr. Matiak's table and shoot Mr. Matiak? Correct. Upon further questioning, she admitted that this was a change in her story from earlier in the proceedings, when she had told authorities that Comeau was only possibly the gunman. Another Crown witness who pointed towards Comeau as the gunman was 23-year-old Port Hope Credit Union computer operator Susan Foote. She also admitted her testimony had changed between early phases of the investigation and the trial. Foote said that she was now positive she'd met McLeod at several Satan's Choice parties 4 years before the shooting. Defence lawyer Bruce Affleck reminded her that she hadn't been so certain about some details when she testified during a preliminary hearing. As for meeting McLeod at a choice gathering 4 years earlier, that was unlikely. If I were to suggest to you that Mr. McLeod was not a member of Satan's Choice 4 years prior to October 18th, would that affect your story? Affleck asked. She still insisted she had seen McLeod that night in the hotel when Bill Matiak's life ended. Further questioning from Kerbal brought the admission that she had also heard talk that a man named Schmutley might have been the killer. She was also sure that the killer was left-handed. The jury wouldn't know it, but Campbell was left-handed, while Comeau and all of the other accused... Oh, we've lost one of the Deep Purple band members as well today. Oh, dear goddess. Well, they're all getting on in years and very likely all being COVID vaccinated as well, which will be a contributing determination and all of that. Anyway, I refer here to adverse reactions, people of Earth. The fucking adverse reactions. The jury wouldn't know it, but Campbell was left-handed while Comeau and all the other accused were right-handed. Former Golden Hawks president Lawrence Leon told the court that Sauvé had threatened Matiak and himself early in 1978, saying he would not live out the year if he didn't shut down the Golden Hawks in Port Hope. It was a potentially damning statement since, like the fat fucker quote from Gillespie's testimony, it suggested the premeditation necessary for a finding of first-degree murder. Leon said he was no longer with the Golden Hawks and that Matejek had been the club's sergeant at arms. There is a rule among outlaw bikers that they cannot testify against anyone, even an enemy. Perhaps Leon was thinking about this while he sat at the witness stand and told the court that he had thought a great deal about threats against Matejek and himself. If it had been me instead of Bill, he'd have come forward too, Leon told the court. None of the accused were to take the stand. They were sticking to the outlaw biker code that forbids a club member from making any comments that might implicate someone else, whether a respected brother or a hated foe. The defence strategy was to open with Campbell as a surprise witness. His account of how he'd shot Matejek should make more sense than anything the jury had heard up to this point. Even if his story wasn't accepted by the jury, Campbell could also bring out the fact that Kermode too had been shot that night. That was crucial for the defence lawyers. It had been established through x-rays that Kermode still carried a bullet in his body, but it wasn't proven that the bullet was fired from the same gun that killed Matejek. Campbell's testimony could potentially compel the judge to order the bullet to be removed from Kermode for forensic testing, and this could be huge for the defence. How could the Crown claim Kermode was the shooter if he was shot with the same gun himself? Campbell would be introduced to the jury by Bruce Affleck, Jeff McLeod's defence lawyer. It was a reunion of sorts for Campbell and Affleck. Back when he worked as a prosecutor, Affleck had nailed a 16-year-old Campbell with a $10 fine for carrying a switchblade. More notably, Affleck had also parked Campbell in the Whitby jail for a year on that imaginative charge of conspiracy to commit perjury. Despite their opposing roles, Campbell had found Affleck oddly likeable as a Crown attorney. Now, with them both on the same team, Affleck bubbled with goodwill at the sight of Campbell and gave him a vigorous thumbs-up biker handshake whenever they met. He explained to Campbell that he'd left work for the Crown because of a heart attack. Defence work would allow him more control in his hours, which should mean less stress. His doctor told him that if he had another heart attack, he wouldn't make it. Affleck was also an Oshawa guy. He paid his way through law school by working as a bouncer at the Brown Derby nightclub at the corner of Yonge and Dundas streets in downtown Toronto. Like Campbell, he had a sharp brain and often bragged about his 149 near genius IQ. In their new jovial relationship, Affleck loved to mention tough guys and then ask Campbell, "Can you take him?" Campbell would invariably reply, "I haven't fought him yet." And Campbell would always think to himself, "I could take that guy." Unfortunately for the new friends, Affleck's old charge against Campbell was now working against them. He confided to Campbell that the Whitby conviction had been the result of a legal version of horse trading, when a couple of accused men were set free in other cases in return for a lawyer convincing Campbell to plead guilty on the rare conspiracy to commit perjury charge. They spoke at a London motel the morning Campbell was to take the stand. "Are you nervous?" Affleck asked. "No." "Do you want some Valium?" "No, I don't take Valium. I like to take them in court when I'm nervous." Campbell relented and took a 5 mg Valium. He took it to quiet Affleck, not to calm his nerves. "He was bugging me so much to take them. He handed me 4. I said, 'I'll take 1. Jesus, 4 would have knocked him right off his socks, especially when you're not used to it. Campbell felt clean, even righteous, as he prepared to take the witness stand. If things went as planned, then the 8 choice members would walk free and Campbell would take all of the heat for the Mattiak shooting. I didn't feel I was doing something brave. For me, it was the right thing to be doing because they, the accused, didn't deserve to be there. I was ready, willing and able to do life. It wasn't all to protect them. It was just the right thing to do. Campbell wore a suit and tie into court, as Affleck had suggested. It was the black suit he sometimes wore to weddings and funerals, the ones he didn't attend in his club colours. Aside from the clothing tip, there was no preparation for what would be Campbell's first and only time testifying in court. None of the rest of the defence lawyers gave him any clue about what type of questioning to expect or what traps could be set for him. Most importantly, he wasn't aware of the need for him to establish that Como had been shot that night. When I was on the stand, I wasn't nervous. I really wasn't, and I wasn't coached. Nobody sat me down and said, "These are the questions the Crown is going to ask." His previous training for dealing with the justice system had come from bikers. It was concise and easy to remember. Don't point fingers at anyone, especially a 1%er, and, when in doubt, answer a question with another question. The jury heard that Campbell was testifying under the Canada Evidence Act, which meant he couldn't be charged for any testimony he gave unless police could independently back it. The bikers already believed that some police were tampering with evidence and intimidating potential witnesses. So it wasn't a stretch for Campbell too to suspect there was a strong chance he would be wearing handcuffs shortly after he left the courtroom. Campbell testified that he'd been wearing a green parka at the bar. Witnesses had described the shooter as wearing a green parka. Como all but lived in his black leather jacket, which he had also worn that night and which had gone missing after his arrest. Under questioning from Affleck, Campbell said he had been drinking at the Choice Clubhouse in Toronto with Gary Como and Larry Hurren the night he got the call about trouble in Port Hope. He felt okay mentioning their names in court because they'd given him permission to do so. As Campbell told things, what happened after he approached Mattiak's table was very simple. I pulled out my gun and I shot him for my own protection. I didn't want to get shot. And where did you shoot him? Affleck asked. In the head. Campbell made it sound painfully understandable. Someone was going to die as soon as Matiak went for his gun, and Campbell didn't want that someone to be anyone with the choice, including himself. I do feel that if he had had a chance, I'd be dead right now, he told the court. Sauve's lawyer, Jack Grossman, used his examination of Campbell to attack the Crown's theory that there had been a murder conspiracy. Plenty of violence was rightly associated with the Satan's choice, but meticulous planning was not the club's strong suit. Did you agree with anyone to kill Mr. Matiak? Grossman asked. No. And did you intend to kill Mr. Matiak when you arrived at the hotel? I had no such instructions. And did anyone suggest to you, sir, that Mr. Matiak should be killed? No. Campbell told the court that he had carried a gun for about 2 years because of propaganda about motorcycle clubs in the newspapers, and because I didn't want to be next. This was his way of saying that he believed bikers had to worry about being shot by police as well as each other. What Campbell didn't volunteer was that guns were also handy things to carry when collecting drug debts. He lied when asked where he got the gun he used that night, saying he bought it from someone in Toronto. He wasn't about to point at whoever handed him the gun and drag someone else into the mess. Instead, he said that no one else knew he was carrying a gun. He also lied when he said he only recognised that Sonny Bronson and Fred Jones were outlaws because of their distinctive skull and crossbones belts. Of course, Campbell didn't need to look at their waists to know who they were. Bronson and Jones had been Satan's Choice clubmates of Campbell's until they patched over to the Outlaws. Again, Campbell was following the 1%er code. Even the hated Outlaws shouldn't be dragged into court cases. Campbell lied again when he said he left the bar in Como's car. In reality, he left with someone else, but didn't want to give up that person's name to authorities. He fumbled when asked about the distance of his arm from Matiak when he shot him. Decades later, he still doesn't know the right answer to that question. This thing happened so fast that I can't remember truthfully how far I was away. It's not like everything happened in 5 minutes. Everything happened in a split second. Kerbal asked Campbell about his client, Nutty Como, immediately after the shooting. Campbell replied that Como had been hurt. That wasn't good enough for the judge to order the bullet removed from Como, so Kerbal pressed on. Well, what did you see? Kerbal asked. What is it that you saw? Well, his coat had a hole in it, and there was blood there. With that, the defence lawyers finally had the answer they so desperately wanted. Now they could push to have the bullet extracted from Como and entered as evidence. Campbell recalls, people were full of anxiety from what I understand before I entered the courtroom. They were very attentive when I was answering questions. The lawyers were extremely anxious because I wasn't answering the way they expected at first. I think a couple of them had to change their underwear when I was done. Not surprisingly, Meinhardt's cross-examination was intense. When Campbell looked at him, he was reminded of a weasel in the Roger Rabbit cartoons, without the laughs. He was pompous. Every time he'd ask me a question, he'd turn around and smile at the jury. That would make me mad. Meinhardt had plenty of smiles for the jury as he asked Campbell about his old perjury conspiracy conviction. In court, the word perjury is never a pretty one unless you're a Crown attorney cross-examining someone convicted of it. And so, not only did you go into the box and tell a lie, you have somebody else go in for you to tell a lie, Meinhardt asked. Yes. And this was for a driving offence? Yes. The implication was as clear as if Meinhardt had climbed up on a chair and screamed it into a megaphone. If Campbell would lie under oath about a driving offence, what might he do in a murder trial to save the skins of 8 of his biker brothers? Campbell recalls feeling calm on the witness stand as he had stuck fast to the 1% code. That code hadn't been explained to the jury. Perhaps if they'd heard it, they would have understood what Campbell was really saying. He was confessing as fully and honestly as he could while trying to limit the damage to just himself. They might even have admired him, since he was stepping up and trying to absorb all of the blame. I believe I basically told the truth, even about the guns. I have bought guns from Toronto before. You have to look at the bigger picture. What's my boy doing? Oh, are you in the same cage? Are you eating little Bo's food? Which is kind of funny because you got the same food in your cage. He's just proving a point. He's proving a point, little Bo. Does it really matter? No, not really. Cheeky little munchkins though. Cheeky little munchkins. Position it so you can watch them for me, so keep an eagle eye on the little Indian ringneck and the little cockatiel. Full of mischief they are, but that's a good thing. When he was on the stand, none of the defence team had thought to remind the jury that Campbell was left-handed, just like the shooter described by Susan Foote, and unlike any of the men in the prisoner's box. After his testimony, Campbell and Affleck were riding the courthouse elevator together when the door opened to a group of defence lawyers standing outside. It was then that Affleck said something that troubled Campbell for years. He said, "I was on Valium when I was on the stand. It really hurt." At that point, it seemed to Campbell that Terry O'Hara, Blaker's lawyer, turned against him. This gnawed at Campbell. He had plenty of respect for O'Hara and felt badly about what he perceived as O'Hara's new negative attitude. It was as though O'Hara were writing him off after hearing about it, even though he'd stepped up and confessed to the killing. As a direct result of Campbell's testimony, something happened in the 7th week of the trial that was worthy of the old Perry Mason television series. Ngāti Kamau was led into Victoria Hospital in London under armed guard and on a heavy-duty leash. Under the supervision of court officers, a medical operation was conducted that could prove beyond all reasonable doubt that he wasn't the shooter. A surgeon cut into Ngāti's side and pulled out a tiny piece of metal. Forensic testing concluded that it was a bullet from the same .38 handgun that killed Matiak. Further forensic testing provided an added bonus. What are they doing? Got to keep an eye on him. I can't see Kermie. Oh yeah, there he is. Oh, little boy, you've got no idea how much danger you're in. You sweet little darling. Here we go. Hey, Kermie, get out of his cage right now. Go on, out you get. He's meant to be safe in there, not have you bully him from inside his own cage. Honestly. Rascals. What you doing, feathery one? Further forensic testing provided an added bonus. A bit of cloth stuck to the bullet fragment was from the coat that Matiak had been wearing at the time he was shot. It had obviously hit Matiak first, since it came to a stop inside Como, long with a bit of Matiak's coat. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, maybe they meant lung. For the Crown's murder scenario to be true, Como somehow shot Matiak with the same bullet that hit himself. Come on, out you get. No. Out you get, little crazy bird. Yes, you're being naughty. No, come on. No, you know you're being naughty. You know you're being a naughty boy. Yes, you do. You know it. Yes, naughty boy. You can't bully your little cockatiel brother, alright? Equal opportunity at Sacred Space. No bullying allowed. He says, but it's my species, it's what we do, Mama G. You go and you swing and play. Do something useful instead of bullying your little brother. Take up a fucking hobby. Here, swing on your swing. Ring the bell. Here, ring the bell. You're just bored. You need some stimulation. Swing on the swing. Play. I got to get them another toy. Some other kind of toy. Anyway, I'm just trying to carefully guard what's left of my money. By the gods. Honestly. Anyway, where were we? Being interrupted by anarchy and chaos of the birdie kind. When Campbell heard the results of the tests, he felt that a storm had passed. The feeling was relief because in all of our minds now, it was clear that the witnesses, for whatever reasons, were wrong. It was physically impossible for Nutty to be the shooter, therefore, there goes the Crown's case. With their backs against the wall, the Crown became more creative and argued the possibility that there were two shooters. It was also noted that the bullet did conclusively place Como at the scene of the crime. All that didn't get past the earlier testimony that there was only one gun. How and why two killers would shoot from the same gun within seconds was never explained. Nor was the fact that none of the witnesses had recalled two gunmen in the bar, and it was too late now for them to change their stories. Campbell had been warned by his own lawyer, John Rosen, that he could be arrested after his courtroom confession, Canada Evidence Act or no Canada Evidence Act. The police just had to swear they were arresting him on other evidence than what he offered in the witness stand. For Campbell, it seemed that they had pulled witnesses out of thin air to implicate his brothers, so why would they not turn their sights on him now? That would take 9 members of the Choice off the streets. The Crown didn't appear to have established much more than the biker's nasty images. In his closing arguments, Meinhardt claimed Campbell wasn't even at the scene of the crime and noted that witnesses didn't place him in the bar. Meinhardt also asked the jury whether it was reasonable for grown men to run around with patches depicting Satan's head on their backs. It was an interesting question, but who in their right mind had ever suggested that outlaw biker life is based on reason? As Meinhardt explained it, the shooting of Bill Matiak was staged as a cold-blooded public execution to send a loud message about what could happen if you defied the Satan's choice. His comments about Campbell dripped with scorn. Nutty Como, Meinhardt claimed, matched the witness's description of the gunman, not Lorne Campbell. It is my respectful submission that you should treat him with all the contempt that he deserves. There isn't an iota of evidence, except from the lips of a convicted perjurer, that the gunman was a dark-haired man with a goatee and an earring in his left ear. All the evidence points to a blonde-haired, blonde-bearded gunman. Justice Coulter Osborne also undermined Campbell's testimony, albeit more subtly. The judge noted to the jury that he was testifying under the Canada Evidence Act, and also that Campbell had a criminal record that included a perjury conviction. That is for you to consider, the judge advised. Years later, the judge described Campbell as the worst witness he had ever seen on the stand. Campbell, meanwhile, has no bad words for the judge. He was the boss I thought he was the most intelligent guy in the room. He was calmer, asking with a curious voice, not like the Crown was. It was a complicated case involving multiple defendants, but the jury didn't take long in their deliberations. After huddling for just a day, the jury found Como and Sauvé each guilty of first-degree murder. This meant they would receive automatic life terms with no eligibility for parole for 25 years. McLeod, Hurren, Blaker and Hoffman were each convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Gordon, Dog Map Van Harlem and Armand in the Trunk Sanguini, the man with the roughest reputation of the bunch, were each found not guilty and immediately released from custody. Campbell was stunned when he heard the verdicts, but says he didn't once second-guess his decision to come forward and testify. I've always been old school. You always protect your brothers, and they didn't deserve to be there. Anybody with any sense would understand that. Right after the verdicts were announced, Campbell felt the need to drop in on his father in Richmond Hill, north of Toronto, where he now lived with Doris. His father had often been brutal in the past, but that day he was understanding and even gentle. I read the papers and I don't care, his father said. You don't have to explain anything, but if you need anything, come here. Campbell took Charmaine with him when he went to visit his mother. I read the papers. What do you think my friends think? She asked. What do you think I'm going through? You know what, Ma? I'm your son, Campbell replied. Charmaine, put your shoes on. We're out of here. There were more visits to his father. He was thin. He didn't eat. It was terminal. Charmaine would rub his back when he was bedridden. It was such a contrast to the fear he'd inspired and the power he'd radiated when Campbell was a child, when a smack from him would send Campbell reeling across the floor. There was nothing threatening about him now. The cancer spread quickly, and on July 23rd, 1980, Lorne Campbell Sr. died in Doris's home. It wasn't a shock or a surprise. It still hit me hard. It hit the whole family hard. He was the youngest of the 13 kids in his family, and he was the first to go. Told ya, living a violent life shortens your lifespan. Completely fucking unnecessary. Most of it is. Campbell had been working construction out of town and missed being with his father at his bedside during his final days. I wasn't there when he died. A lot of people didn't forgive me for that. I don't think he owed him that much, quite frankly. What do you owe someone that constantly bet you up as a kid? Fucking nothing. Trust me on that one. Anyway. Campbell was visiting his friend Joe Napolitano at his lodge near Port Carling, north of Toronto, in 1982 when he heard the news about the appeal application. Napolitano was now out of tattooing and making big money in the construction business and real estate. He was a little crazy in a good way, and his brother John was crazier. Loyal friends, the pair of them. There was still the hope that the 6 Port Hope convictions would be overturned. The original decision seemed too crazy to remain intact, even if the jury discounted Campbell's confession. For instance, how did they explain away the bullet extracted from Ngāti Kaumau with cloth fragments from Metiak's coat on it? At the time of the appeal, Campbell was lying low. He was wanted by the police for questioning after he put a severe beating on a man in an attempt to locate the man's brother, Jerry, who had previously escaped from Campbell after being hunted just for speaking bad about us. Campbell recalls, Jerry jumped off a 3rd-floor balcony to get away from me. He turned to the friend who was with him and said, "Holy fuck, did you see that?" They looked over the balcony and Jerry was nowhere to be seen. A little later, Jerry phoned to taunt them, saying he had been hiding behind the bushes, laughing and saying, "You didn't get me." So they decided to pound Jerry's location out of his brother. I kept him up all night and bet him. Kept him all day and bet him. Then I dropped him off at the hospital because I liked him. In the end, Campbell bumped into Jerry at a booze can, but he spared him a beating because he heard Jerry's son had just died of a drug overdose. He even offered to drive Jerry to the funeral, but when he showed up to give him a ride, Jerry said he was too hungover. "It's your son, Jerry," Campbell said, and drove off. Particularly since the London trial, Campbell needed good friends like the Napolitanos. He had been drinking hard, bypassing the seductive charms of whiskey for the near knockout stupor of 95 proof alcohol, which could become a torch with the drop of a match. The alcohol did its job and also left him with daily stomach aches. Jesus. Try as he might, Campbell couldn't drink himself past the cruel irony of the case. He prided himself on being a club protector, and yet when he had stepped forward to sacrifice himself for the group, he failed miserably. He had followed the 1%er code to a T while on the witness stand, and the result was a public disaster. The one time he testified in court was against himself, and he wasn't believed. For all of Campbell's noble intentions, a half-dozen of his clubmates were in prison for a crime he committed while he remained a free man. It would have been an easy time to quit the outlaw biker life, especially after he got news that the efforts to appeal the 6 guilty verdicts had quickly failed and his biker brothers could expect to remain in prison for a long, long time. He walked alone to the end of the wharf at Joe Napolitano's lodge, stared out onto the waters and wondered how things could have gone so wrong after he stepped forward to tell the truth. I don't mind telling you, I cried over that one. Right, I think we'll stop there. It was a slightly longer chapter than we've been having. It felt longer. Maybe it's in my mind. It was a little bit longish. Next one's a bit longish too. So I'll continue tomorrow. I'm not feeling all that well, and I've provided my wonderful, beautiful, blessed YouTube audience with my daily story reading, and we've all got something out of that service to the gods. And I'm going to go and have a little lie down and rest now by the gods. So wherever you are on planet Earth, blessed be. Stay happy, stay wild, stay free, and stay as healthy as you can possibly manage in these weird times. And hold your line and cleave to your own truth and try to do the right thing by other people and yourself at the same time, which can be a bit of a dance. Live your best life. Bye for now, people of Earth. I'll be back tomorrow, no doubt. Take good care.